well, Gerrard slipped and get the pass in here. Rodriguez again, it's a stunning volley.
Hello there, listeners. For the Fun Show is back, and there's three of us. Keno, you've been signed on for another season, mate. Welcome back.
I mean, even though we discussed about doing the Football League
Well, yeah, we were going to relegate you to a Championship podcast, but
I was going to form a new show.
I did tell you, Ben, when we started last year, not to give Keno if he plays in 20 shows, we have to extend his contract for a year clause.
I think the thing is, though, right, we laugh at this, but come the end of the season, that playoff final that Keno will have tickets to is going to be whetting the appetite. So yes, boys, you did hear the two of them just there. Work the Spaces back again. How you doing, Jack?
Hello, yeah, I'm okay. I feel like we should kind of introduce ourselves more than normal because new season, new people.
New season, new us. I should say, yes, I'm Ben, Dr. Benji on the internet. Ben, how you doing? And Keno, Jack. You're like Jack, you're Callum. Hi, Callum. Now I've confused everybody. People were thinking, all right, that's Jack, that's Ben, and that's Jack again. No, Callum. Callum Keane, how you doing, Keno?
It must be like sort of when August begins, there's a kind of subconscious switch in my head that tells me that football's coming. And as you two will probably know, I've been pretty... since we went down, I've been fairly kind of just...
Yeah.
I didn't want anything to do with football.
Been talking a lot about cycling, a lot about athletics recently. Cricket's been on the mind.
Anything but football. But with the signing of Ross McCormack today, I'm quite excited. I'm getting excited for football, Premier League and Championship.
That's Villa dealt with, everyone. Yeah. Don't worry, that's Villa dealt with for the season.
That's the yearly chat.
That's the yearly chat. Right then, what we're going to do, folks, is there's going to be a show every single day of this week. So we're going to go through Monday to Friday. We have 4 teams per show. If you watched my Premier League previews last year on my channel, you'll know all about these. Keno, you were part of that. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I said we'd finish mid-table.
Yeah, you convinced me you'd be 10th.
I convinced everyone, I think.
Yeah, you did. Right, so what we're going to do is going to kick off with the Gunners last time out. They finished second in the Premier League. Strange, isn't it? Because it felt like it was a 2-horse race and they weren't involved. But they came second last year, and I guess the big question I should say, by the way, before we record, I mean, we might put this in the start, actually, but we're recording on the 4th of August, so if they do end up making transfers, sorry, we've recorded in advance. But yes, Arsenal so far...
They won't, will they?
They won't, we'll be fine.
No, it's fine, yeah.
The lack of transfer action at the Emirates, though, is concerning, Jack. It's same old, same old.
I mean, you thought Arsenal, they've turned over a new leaf. They've got Xhaka before the Euros. Like, they're sorted now. The trend has been set. No, the trend does very much remain the same. They did announce Takuma Asano, who, as we know, long-term listeners of the podcast, I do love my Japanese players.
I don't know.
I'm looking forward to seeing Asano at the Olympics. 21 years old, striker. Not the biggest, but keep an eye out. I don't know why they've signed him for £1.2 million. Yeah, well, Wenger, what's happened?
It's like... what's weird is they haven't been on tour to, like, Japan. Because it's the signing that kind of is a shirt sale abroad.
Yeah.
But they're doing it to, like, an unknown player. So I don't know how well known he is in Japan. And they've also brought in Rob Holding from Bolton. I mean... Arsenal.
Ben,
I mean,
who's he?
Well, he's a hot prospect. He's one of those. They've let go Mikel Arteta, who's actually joined the coaching staff at City, hasn't he, with Guardiola?
Yes,
I think.
He did. Yeah. Which I thought was quite interesting. I would have been surprised they wanted to keep him.
Szczesny's gone back on loan to Roma. Flamini has been released. Rosicky has been released, which I think for Arsenal fans is probably quite a good sign that it forces Wenger either to buy or bring through youth. And Wenger's
also just leave it all together
and
leave it.
Yeah, but he's going to bring
Mesut Ozil and holding midfield.
He's going to bring some youth through. I still feel like. So what do we think Arsenal need? We have this chat every year. I feel like
they're being linked with Draxler, aren't they?
Yes. Well, is that happening? Is that rumours?
I mean, lots of people have been linked with lots of teams this summer. I'm still waiting for Goetze to sign for Liverpool.
Yeah, that's a shame.
What do you mean he's signed for Dortmund?
I mean, we should say, as we're sort of going, what we're going to do with each team. We're kind of moving alphabetically, and we're going to sort of do ins and outs, aren't we, gents?
Yeah.
And then and sort of expectations for the season,
and then predictions. Little predictions.
Maybe a prediction. Any other notable business around them. So we'll kind of try and move through like that. I think. I mean, seeing you mentioned Draxler. I was brushing up on my German the other day and reading an article in Bild.
Kino, good Tag.
Yeah, and I can only read.
Well, they say hello.
But they did talk about. Well, I can, yeah, but they did talk about this sort of exodus from Wolfsburg, and there's been problems with the ownership there, and a lot of their players. I mean, Schürrle, for instance, jumped ship to a rival, and although they recently signed Draxler. I think if Arsenal have been buzzing around him for ages when he was at Schalke as well. Yeah. But I'm not even sure he would be the player that they need. It's sort of a never-ending woe.
Well, I think for
Arsenal fans,
they need success continentally. They need to do something in Europe, and every year they get stopped at the same kind of mark.
They always play Bayern Munich, or
they do.
Or Barcelona.
They always play a good team. That's all it is. They play a really good team.
I feel like if you're Arsenal fans, you want to do more than that. You want to get more. I know, obviously, last year, second, it kind of got forgotten about, didn't, because of the nature of Spurs' collapse and the fact Leicester won the league, so everyone after them, it didn't matter where you finished.
It was so irrelevant after Leicester, wasn't it?
Yeah. But with Takuma Asano, I've done some research. He is going to solve the continental crisis. This year, in the Asian Champions League, 3 goals in 4 games for Sanfrecce Hiroshima.
Prolific. But just quickly then, let's talk about this though, because we're talking about ins and outs. Arsenal have done so little. Xhaka, I think we'd all agree, is a good signing. A signing they should have made for a little while. But I don't want to lay blame early in the season, but it feels as if Arsenal might bring in Lacazette, might bring another striker. Maybe they might do. That's the rumour.
It might be Icardi.
But Icardi's been rumoured as well. I think he might be going to. He might be the Higuain replacement at Napoli, though. That's the talk. But even so, whose fault is this then? Because you keep being told by the board that Wenger's got money to spend it if he wants, and he's not doing it. So he's holding them back. I feel personally like Arsene Wenger is holding Arsenal back, and I don't know why.
You made a good point about the board and sort of the bullishness that they've shown in the last few years. Now they've kind of paid off the Emirates over the last decade, but this year there was some comments that Ivan Gazidis made this summer. And if you compare them to sort of 3 years ago, and I think this is in a reaction in a way to the big moves that have been happening, particularly at the Manchester clubs and obviously Chelsea, and sort of the competitiveness, the increased competitiveness in that top sort of 6, 7, 8 clubs. He was a lot more conservative, I think, in his outlook for the rest of the season, and sort of their transfer policy. Sort of, he highlighted how competitive the top of the league was, and that they'd made decent progress. I think there's not the kind of optimism in the transfer market and sort of the trumpeting of the money that they have in the same way that they did a few years ago. And I think while Arsenal fans, as the saga has sort of gone on for the last 5 or 6 years, they'll still be expecting good results. But I really do feel that last year and maybe the year before was their chance to really get some silverware. And I worry for Arsenal going forward this year just because of the massive strides that everyone else has made. In sort of comparison, really, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them, I think, to hold on to their Champions League spot this year.
It's like the £30 million transfers have become 60 million or 50 million pound transfers, and Arsenal don't want to get into that market. Essentially, they're only ripped off. So their outlook is, if we act as if we're not going to spend money, we can't be taken for a ride. But actually what happens is they don't bring in any quality players.
And that is admirable to a degree. I mean, as a sort of a sane football fan, I quite respect that.
I'll pitch it to you, Kino. If you're £1,000 a season ticket holder,
exactly.
It must be quite galling that they're just unprepared, it seems, to spend the money that brings the success to the club. Because they've won an FA Cup recently or whatnot, but if you're an Arsenal fan, you want the league back. You've had it before. You know what it feels like. You want it back. And I
really like that analogy that the kind of the little anecdote you said there about the transfers, because it's very true that the signing of Xhaka for 35 million. I mean, probably around the turn of the decade, that would have been a sort of 10-15 million pound move.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 20 tops. It was that sort of deal.
And it would have been a kind of a decent average transfer. Bolstered the squad, very good player. But it's not the kind of one that you'd sign.
Can I give a theory to how I think Arsenal's rest of the window is going to go now?
I mean, yes, 4th of August.
They're not going to sign anyone. They're going to lose to Liverpool. They're going to lose to Leicester in their first 2 games, and they're going to panic.
Yeah.
And they're going to make one of those big transfers, a bit like they did with Ozil.
We might see a situation as to how he did, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. We mentioned Arteta. When he came into the club and they brought in Mertesacker and Arteta, and all very late in the window, we could see a similar situation to that, actually. I think also when you see how good and how far teams like City and Chelsea have come,
I think that might almost be the reaction from Arsenal, that, my word, there's some teams in this division that have gone for it.
Put it this way, if City and Chelsea stick 4 or 5 past teams in the beginning and they look awesome, then Arsenal will really panic.
They're steady on. Villa aren't in the league this year.
What I love, though, just to wrap up on Arsenal, transfer wise, what I love is the players that Arsenal are linked with are just players they don't really need, like Mahrez and Draxler. It's like if there's one area you don't need players, it's those sort of pacey, quite exciting
Inside
wide
forwards.
players, like attacking with playmakers. That's one place you don't need them, and that's all they're bloody linked with. They need, they need a centre back, Jack. But go on.
Yeah, well, I've been watching a little bit of their pre-season. Oxlade-Chamberlain has had his typical pre-season of score loads of screamers, look amazing.
Yeah, and they
get injured now.
Weeks.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, yeah, but I think they need a centre back, and they probably need another rock in the middle. Despite Xhaka being good, I think they need something else as well, just in case, or just for when Jack Wilshere gets injured. Essentially, have it ready.
Is he not injured at the moment?
I think there was rumours that he actually got, like you tell me, scans. There's apparently has got a knock.
Of course he has.
I wish I was joking. They've got El Neni and they've got Xhaka and they've got Ramsey and Wilshere and they've got Sanchez, of course. Cazorla, who plays there as well. But I still feel as if they miss somebody else, and I don't know if that player exists.
I think El Neni could be the solution.
They've got Coquelin as well, actually, who's played well for them.
And they do, but I'm not sure Coquelin's the kind of player, a converted fullback, that you'd really want Arsenal to be. He's not a Nemanja Matic in his pomp, is he? He's not the kind of rock that you would base your midfield on. I think Xhaka would be a really nice player alongside someone in that Matic mould. To sort of control that midfield and to really, particularly against the weaker teams, sort of put their stamp on the game.
Yeah.
Maybe El Neni will turn into that after another season, maybe a Premier League experience, but in the here and now, I agree they're possibly one player short in there still.
Do we, just very, very quickly, do we think they need to upgrade on Giroud before the window closes? Do we think they should?
I don't think they need to upgrade on him. They just need to bring on someone who can play alongside him. And
my theory on Giroud it is kind of, I mean, as he's shown for the last 4 years in the Premier League, he can score against pretty much every team outside of the kind of the top 4, the big games. He goes missing, but I'm not really sure that you need for what Arsenal want to do. You need to have a striker who can bang in goals against the best teams in the world. Maybe, as you say, if they want to go deep in the Champions League, they might need a striker like that. But as Leicester showed, and teams like Chelsea, you don't need to kind of to blast the other big teams off the park to do well in the league. And a player like Giroud can pick up hatfuls of goals against the slightly lesser defences where his lack of movement isn't quite as needed. He's not left as wanting. So I think he could be okay for another year or two for Arsenal. I know probably many Arsenal fans might disagree with me.
I think Arsenal fans just want him to score 10 more goals than he is doing at the moment. He got 16 in 38 last year.
You'd like to think that would come from other places now, as someone like Oxlade-Chamberlain matures, and you'd expect Sanchez to get 10, maybe 15 a season as well. So
yeah, moving on to where we think, what their expectation is, I think, Jack, because of what other teams have done, does it then change or alter Arsenal's expectation? Or is the league?
I was going to say, I don't feel like, as an Arsenal fan, you could realistically sit right now and say, I expect us to challenge for a title. I feel like this is one of the most competitive Premier League seasons ever. There's a lot of unknown quantities in terms of new managers coming in. If I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm sat thinking, please top 4. Because that's kind of the minimum thing for Arsenal, so many kind of occasions. And I think this year, it's going to be the hardest it's ever been to finish top 4 this year. I think it's going to be an unbelievably competitive league. Yeah. And I'd be a little bit worried. I feel like Wenger, he needs he needs to make something happen. They need an X factor, not necessarily a big name signing for the sake of it, but a player who can really add a new dimension to this Arsenal side.
Well, I think this could be Wenger's last year with Arsenal. I think we could be seeing it because
I'd be amazed if it is because he's not spent. I think he'll spend in his last year.
Maybe he's just saving it all up for next year.
I think he's almost sort of just kind of inherently against any sort of big spending that we see from some of the other teams. I think that he just won't do that. But the thing that has been keeping him in his job, particularly in justifying it to the owners and the management upstairs at Arsenal, is that continued Champions League place and sort of working this into my prediction. I mean, we've not done the other clubs yet, so I'm trying to formulate a top four in my head or what I would predict. But I don't think Arsenal would be in it if the United, City and Chelsea perform how they could do. And then you've got that final slot for Arsenal, and that could be between them, Spurs, Liverpool. It will be very, very difficult for Arsenal to get into the top four this year. And I do think if they drop out, that could be the death knell for in Wenger's.
All right, let's have a prediction then, Kino. Where do you think they'll finish? I know you've not got our table in front of you, but
fifth. I think they will just miss out because of the fierce competition. I think it'll be
Jack.
tight, but.
I'll say fourth. I think they'll get it again. I think they'll probably make a few more transfers.
They could just finish above Spurs every time. Yeah, probably.
I just think they're gonna. I feel like it's the Arsenal thing to do, and I think they're probably going to add a bit more strength to the team, and it might be a little bit reactionary some of the transfers they make. But I think realistically that's what they'll get.
Yeah.
Almost though, I think it would be better for Arsenal to miss out this year. I think they could do.
That might be the end of Wenger, and if that happens,
that's my thing. I think it will be his last year if that happens, and it may be the best thing that could happen for Arsenal.
I think fourth as well. I don't think they've got enough to challenge for a title because of what other clubs are doing. But I think fourth looks almost nailed on. I think you've still got to remember they've got some, like Sanchez is a ridiculously good player. I mean, Ozil in his day is a ridiculously good player, and would get in like any of the other sides in that top sort of four.
Both of them,
so.
Yeah.
And you got to give them credit for that. And that's why I put them ahead of, say, a Liverpool or a Tottenham, because I don't think there are those players in those sides that would break into that sort of top three team mould right now. So there's Arsenal then, dealt with. There's with Arsenal, there's more question marks to talk about with that team than there is with some other sides. And we'll move on to one of those now, who had a very good debut season in the Premier League, gentlemen. We're moving on to Bournemouth. And Eddie Howe is looking to build. I think you can tell from the signings he's made. Jordan Ibe's come in, Brad Smith's come in, Lewis Cook, who's very highly rated, has come in from Leeds as well. Nathan Ake's on loan from Chelsea, had a decent spell at Watford last year. There's Mousset as well from Le Havre. I'm not going to pretend I know loads about him. No. But he's bought British again. He's bought young, and it's going to be fascinating to see how Bournemouth do second time round. It's that second season syndrome, isn't it? How will Bournemouth get on? Kino, you saw Villa beat them last year. So, you've got history against this side.
Don't remind me. It all looks so sunny on the south coast.
that opening weekend. But in all seriousness, though, obviously, the big news for Bournemouth is that despite a little bit of speculation, Eddie Howe didn't go to England. So they've got him again for another year. Everything seems quite settled. They've had some experienced players leave, but you can tell that he's trying to build around the youth that is within that side. Obviously, the big loss was Matt Ritchie, who's gone to Newcastle. So it's a bit of a strange transfer as well, that one. Not something I think many people expected.
No, in terms of division, but I think in terms of size of the club, he could be.
I
think Ritchie. I mean, I don't want to sort of sit on Newcastle, but I think it's similar to what a lot of players join Newcastle for, in the sense that they're a stepping stone sort of team, maybe to a top 10, 8 club.
Tommy Elphick's done the same thing, really. So going to Villa. Yeah. So what do we think about Bournemouth?
Good signing, by the
way. Bournemouth's transfers, I find interesting because they've stayed up last year on their own merit. And it's a case of, if you looked at their squad, you probably would have said not good enough to stay up. But they were good enough. Eddie Howe made them play well. He set his team up strongly. As you mentioned, some of the experienced players who I don't want to say they were instrumental in last season, but they certainly played a role, have left. And they've brought in lots of young players. They've brought in Hibman, who is a young American. Ake, who you already talked about. Mousset, who actually has 14 goals in 28 games, I think it was last year, in Ligue 1. So he has a little bit of a kind of, a fanfare around him, despite being, 20. So he's looking like he could be a player for the future as well. It's a case of, I think they've brought some of the best young players around who they could realistically attract as Bournemouth for a modest fee, and they're now trying to establish themselves as a Premier League squad. And there is an inherent risk in this, in that you don't go out there and buy proven Premier League players in a lot of cases with these players, and you're hoping that they're going to step up to the occasion. You know, they've bossed it in the leagues they've been in the scenarios they've been in. And it's a similar attitude to last season. And I don't know if Bournemouth were lucky last year. I feel like you have to be lucky and ride your own luck to stay up, particularly, Bournemouth going into it being the minnows of the Premier League last year.
Do we think they've got enough firepower? Because you mentioned Mousset. I don't want to correct you, Jack, but I'm going to. Mousset came from League 2, League 2. As it would be.
League Dirt. Well, thank you for
so it's like signing a Ross McCormack. We're getting all the references in, but it's like signing that kind of player instead.
Le Havre do have a very good reputation for developing youngsters, though. So I feel it's kind of, if you were going to sign anyone from the
But I think the criticism you'd have thrown at Bournemouth last season is they didn't score enough goals. Really, like they were fine, they were safe, but the teams that went down were quite poor. Not a shock, they just were. And Josh King, 6 goals, was the top goal scorer for Bournemouth last year. That is not enough. That is not enough at all.
This is the thing for me. I think if you could raise any question mark over it, I really, really like Eddie Howe, but if you could sort of raise any element of his managerial career so far, and put a question mark over it, it would be the transfers, and then his and of course that's something that you'd expect for him to get in time, as you get used to dealing in Premier League personnel. But if you look at the signings that they made this time last year, and people did sort of commend those that they were quite interesting players like Glenn Murray, Sylvain Distin, Lee Tomlin,
they had a Turbo for a time last year as well, which is
they did, but players like Murray, Tomlin, Christian Atsu, Distin, none of those are at the club, and they joined this time last year, but only Adam Federici, who they signed last summer, is still there. And I think that sort of shows that many of the signings that they made, I know they were unlucky with players like Gradle, who got a long-term injury.
Yeah, Mings as well.
Yeah, but those signings haven't yet sort of come to fruition, I don't think, for Bournemouth, and they stayed up last year playing a very similar style and using many of the same players that they won the Championship with. And if you look, the two of their main players like that, Ritchie and Elphick, have now gone. So there's question marks for me around Bournemouth. I think they will be fine. I think they'll stay up, but it's how well Howe can sort of integrate these new faces and maybe change the style slightly from what he's sort of taken them up with for the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
I do feel like to criticise their lack of firepower is a little bit harsh, because really, in the final third, Bournemouth did not have a settled strike partnership for the entire season. They had Gradle, who got injured. Wilson got injured. Afobe and Grabban came in the winter transfer window. Joshua King came in originally to play out wide from Blackburn, and he was forced to play down the middle. I'm kind of interested to see who does emerge as their kind of, I guess, strike force this year. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to see how it plays out.
I think it'll be Afobe.
Fairly decent players there.
I think Afobe will be that guy.
I'd like to see them go with Afobe as well, because I think he I mean, a lot of my friends around here are Wolves fans. They were very disappointed to see him go, spoke very highly of him, and I think he does have the pedigree to be a very good Premier League striker, so I'd like to see them stick with him. He may go back to Wilson. Wilson could be good as well, but I do agree with Jack.
They spent a lot of money on Grabban as well. It's strange, they spent quite a lot of money on Grabban and Afobe, but they play a style which really, in my opinion anyway, really suits one striker, because the chances are they'll play Gradle one side and Josh King the other, and then potentially, because obviously you know Matt Ritchie now, then they'll play one through the middle. Jack, any thoughts on who you think it might be? I mean, Bournemouth fans will probably know better than us on this at this point. You probably have
I
an
think
idea.
that actually, whilst you could make the case for the fact they could play 3 up top, I actually think they might play 2 up top a lot of games this year, and then maybe deploy players like Gradle and King slightly deeper to really hit teams on the break. I feel like it's going to be interesting, because I feel like with Eddie Howe, the players that he has, you look across this Bournemouth squad, there's a lot of flexibility, I guess, in terms of how they can line up. But one of the areas where they don't have a ton of players is actually kind of your traditional wide midfielder position. There just isn't that many players in that area. So I think you will see some of those players perhaps get forced a little bit deeper this year.
Yeah.
I think when they go to the bigger Premier League teams, you're looking for that lone forward. I actually think it'll be Callum Wilson who plays the head of Afobe, but I think actually Wilson and Afobe will be the kind of go-to duo.
A little bit more physical.
They've had a Leicester last season-esque pre-season.
Well, I was going to say we can't watch every pre-season friendly. Bournemouth fans may have seen the lineups that he's played in the friendlies and have a better idea than us.
Yeah.
But
They've been unbeaten in pre-season.
yeah, I did see that.
I will say that they get a 3-3 against Portsmouth though, so but they got a draw against Valencia, so which isn't not too bad, is it? Shall we predict sort of predictions of where we think Bournemouth will go? I think second season syndrome. People expect them to sort of be in that bottom six battle, but you'd hope for their sake they'd be safe. But I'll kick things off actually and say I think that they will be in trouble this year. I think people might work Bournemouth out a little bit, and the firepower for me is still a concern. If they have a striker that scores 10-15, I think they'll be fine. But I wonder if they've got that.
I think for me, anything ahead of kind of relegation, it is what they'll want this year. Bournemouth, the signings they've made, they're not trying to make much progress in terms of the league position. They're very much trying to cement themselves as a Premier League side and do it kind of the Bournemouth way, I guess, in terms of not going out there and signing players with big names or big price tags. I'm excited to see how they get on. I think, as I said,
they signed someone, of course, with a little name and a big price tag, John Knibe.
They have for 15 million, but with the exception of that, it's still
literally.
But like when you look at the rest of the Premier League teams and how much money they're spending, it is a very small amount that they've kind of forked out in general. But I think anything other than 18th, 19th, or 20th, and they'll be happy this year.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, Kino?
I'm cautious to bring in my optimism, as last season it was so catastrophically wrong.
He's saying Leicester. He's saying title, folks. He's saying title. He thinks there's a Leicester.
I think the style that we've seen historically with Howe and Bournemouth might change a little bit. With those that they have lost a little bit the core that brought them up, and I think that change of style might actually be for the better. I still think they'll probably be in the bottom half, but a little bit more optimistic than you guys, sort of maybe 12th, 13th, lower mid-table.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's the kiss of death from you after last season.
Yeah, they'll go down now. So.
All right, fair enough. Good luck to Bournemouth.
I think
and Eddie Howe.
16th, just to be clear. I didn't really give a position. So
yeah, I'll go 18th. I think they'll just go down. I know, I hate to say it, but that's what I think. Right, let's move on to a team that have just come up then. Burnley Football Club are back in the Premier League, back in the big time, and they had a very good year last year, all things taken into account. Top of the Championship, Andre Gray being their superstar, 23 goals for him in the league. And it's the question, isn't it, that we've seen so often with teams that have come up from the Premier League in recent years. Have they got enough to stay up, Jack? In a word?
No.
Okay, there we are then.
Sorry, I feel like they actually fit a similar mould in some ways to Bournemouth in terms of what we expect from Bournemouth last year, where they've not actually signed that many players. They've kind of come into the league, but then teams like Burnley, like Bournemouth, they always seem to find a way to make it stick. I think it's worth remembering, of course, that Burnley, they've not actually been out of the Premier League for that long. And you hear of a lot of teams like Bournemouth, kind of when they first come up, and there's kind of this yo-yo, which teams kind of want to do in some ways, whereby you'll go up, you go back down, you go back up again, you kind of, that second time up, you make something more happen. I look through the Burnley transfers, and there's no player there that jumps out at me as that is a player who can make a difference this year. And I know they did very well in the Championship last year, and you mentioned Gray, who I think is going to be instrumental for them. My concern is, do they have enough Premier League proven players, or are they going to be kind of, one of those teams that come up and we just don't see enough from them? They have lost a few players as well. You talk about like Jerry Barton, for example, who I believe was captaining them last year.
Yeah,
a massive player for them.
Very
I think he
got
got in the. Did he get in the Football League Team of the Year? I think he did.
I think he did. Yeah.
So he's gone to Rangers. They've lost a few other experienced players as well, and I worry for Burnley. They could be this year's Villa. They wear the same colours, and I've just not. I've not heard.
If you've got to this point of the podcast, that is some top tier analysis from Workspace right there. They wear the same colours.
Well, I feel like we're going to be getting deja vu this year, I'm afraid, and I hate to say it. I think what the biggest kind of telling point about Burnley's pre-season for me is the fact the only news story I've read about them is the fact that the fans have voted to not have goal music when they score this season.
Yeah, I saw that actually. I think you should adopt Burnley as your team because of the colours. In the Premier League this year. You don't seem convinced. How do you think they'll do this year?
I think the problem is Burnley, and it sort of pains me to say this because I love to see a team sort of come up. I mean, I guess Bournemouth did it a little bit last year, and I guess it's quite a good comparison, really, to compare the two and how they've sort of dealt with this summer. To progress and to stay in the league, even, you have to spend an awful amount of money now. Particularly as the sort of mid-table, the rising middle class of the Premier League are just splashing out figures that would have previously been, only the top four would have been spending, the 20, 30 millions. I do worry that Burnley may have the same problem that they did last season. 2 seasons ago when they came down. That, as admirable as it is, Dyche's approach, to try and be faithful and loyal to the players that brought him up and to sort of develop and take a longer term approach, it may not be the way to stay in the league in this current climate. And so I do worry for them. I think they're more likely for me to go down than Bournemouth. And you can look at the comparison, say the £15 million on Jordan Ibe, as a sort of direct comparison that maybe Bournemouth are more ready to do what needs to be done to survive. And it, as I say, it pains me to say it a little bit, but I think that's what might be.
Can I give a player to look out for this year on the Burnley side? A player myself, for Tarkowski, their centre back. He's Polish and English dual nationality. I had him in Football Manager, which is how I know about him. He was actually in League One 2 years ago or 3 years ago, playing for Oldham, and he made the move to Brentford, I believe, and then he's now moved on to Burnley. I'm kind of interested to see how he gets on.
I'm also excited. I mean, I was quite negative about Burnley though, but there are some players that I would really like to do well. Andre Gray for one.
Yeah, I think
how he goes.
He I think last year we talked about strikers that we obviously. I think last year the focus was on players like Callum Wilson and Cameron Jerome. Will they keep their promoted size up? Yeah, he is the new version. 25 years of age, has never proven it in the Premier League before. This is his opportunity. 2 or 3 years ago he was at Luton. Now he's going to be in the Premier League with the big boys. If he can do it, I mean, we've seen players come from the lower leagues.
Austin, Ings.
Yeah, those as well. Jamie Vardy was going to be my actual example. But who have come from sort of the non-league side. He was at Hinckley United in 2010. He's been around. And it's going to be interesting to see how a player like him does in this division. I think Burnley, momentum is like a very powerful thing, and winning the championship, they did it.
They did win it.
They did it very well.
That's true.
I think the momentum from that might keep them up, and they will be kind of this year's Burnley. Bournemouth. Sorry, they are Burnley. They will have a decent year, I think, and they'll maybe finish their sort of 15th, 16th. I just think if they can play as a team, I think they lack a bit of quality, but their teamwork could go a long way. And there's a lot of despite them losing players like Dre Barton, I think there's still some experience in that side, and it's going to do them well. Matthew Loughton there as well, in that side, so you know all about him.
Brilliant goal against Stoke away.
There's one highlight.
You remember that?
I'm trying to get a Villa reference into every team. It might be difficult.
Well, I feel as though I haven't woven the Villa into a lot of this podcast. It's been you guys for quite a lot of this.
Keno, for the first time in 25 years, mate, we've not been able to include Villa. 29 years. We haven't been able to include Villa in sort of the first 4 teams of a Premier League preview. I just want to, this is just me sort of phasing it out for the next 10 years. Just the way it is. Have you boys just given predictions of where you think they'll finish?
No.
20th.
With them. 20? Wow, that is bold.
Oh, Jack.
No,
I'm sorry. Someone has to be 20th.
Yeah,
someone has to be there.
It won't be Burnley. There's a team that will set the record low points total. Stay tuned to future podcasts to find out who I think that'll be.
Who do you...
Oh, actually, no, 19th.
Yeah,
so I've just remembered who there is.
You just worked out who it is. The whole preview is coming up soon. Keno?
Yeah.
Keno, where do you think they'll finish?
18th.
All right, 18.
I think they will go down.
You think they'll go down? Okay, right. Let's final one. This preview's gone on longer than we anticipated, boys. Final team. Well, there's a new manager at the helm for Chelsea. Conte's in. Keno, you're excited.
Probably more excited to see how Conte works at Chelsea than I am.
Apologies.
Bless you, Ben.
Thank you.
No, just probably more excited to see how Conte gets on than and then the football that they'll play. Than maybe Guardiola at City. I think, as he showed during the Euros, he's arguably the most exciting and progressive manager in the world right now in terms of tactics.
Behind Klopp.
Yeah. No. Yeah,
Liverpool bias. Sorry, I was saying that to be Liverpool bias just to play the narrative.
Well, it's a good job I'm here for the Liverpool cast.
I'm delighted you're here for the Liverpool cast.
But yeah, no, Conte, incredibly excited to see how he moulds this Chelsea team. They've had some interesting signings. I mean, the Kante one we can talk about a little bit. I'm not certain that Well, they definitely would have gone for him, put it this way, if he hadn't had the season he had. And I feel as though a team, maybe Conte's called for him, and it was a special request on behalf of the manager, but I'm not certain about that signing. And personally, I would like to see him stay.
It's a strange. It's not strange because you think
he's an excellent player, but
any other season you'd have thought excellent, but if you look at it in like the reverse of this, that he's gone from a champion, like the champions of England, he's giving up his Champions League like spot essentially to go and play for Conte, to go and play for Chelsea. It's obviously one of those things that we thought that Mahrez might do it. I mean, he still might. Vardy obviously turned down the chance to go to Arsenal, so it's. I mean, we should have spoken about the Arsenal thing, by the way. The fact Arsenal went for Jamie Vardy, but even so, him going there. It's how do you look at that? Do we think that's a sideways move in the weirdest of ways because of what he's giving up, or is it still a step up? I think Chelsea fans. I'm not saying that Leicester are a bigger club than you. Of course, I don't think they are because of what you've won in the last sort of 10 years. But what I'm saying is it a sideways move, moving from there to no European football?
I think it's a case of one step backwards actually for 2 steps forward.
Okay,
I think that's how he will have squared it to himself, and justifying the move.
Yeah. He clearly feels the safer bet is with Chelsea long term, and for his career, going to a team like Chelsea to the opportunity is more beneficial to him.
Oh, certainly, and I think I kind of bashed him a little bit at the beginning of this section, but I think he'll be an excellent player that will suit the philosophy of Conte perfectly.
Yeah.
And it may be his sort of honest, no ego, and the amount of running that he brings could be exactly what Chelsea need after the many years of decadence under people like Mourinho, etc. That he could be the perfect antidote to that. And I think just seeing how Chelsea adapt. I put it this way: I think the games between United, City, and Chelsea this year. I know, like Sky likes to make a big meal out of it every year, but I think these matches and pitting the wits of Conte against Guardiola and Mourinho will be some of the most fascinating games we've had in the Premier League for many a year. I think it'll be.
I would agree.
And I think that's what makes seeing how Chelsea develop so exciting. It'll be really interesting to see because it's a big departure from what they've had, as I said, for the last decade.
Jack, can I ask you, Jack? Are you surprised that they've kept on to pretty much every player they would have wanted to keep hold of?
Yeah, they've had.
I think actually, not really, because actually I think the Conte move in is a massive draw actually for a lot of these players, and kind of this attitude of we've not got European football this year. We can now go and push for a title without any distractions. Brand new manager. It's an exciting time to be at Chelsea Football Club, and I think much like perhaps Kante was lured in from a Leicester, it would be very easy to see how a lot of players at Chelsea declined moves or didn't have those moves away, because realistically Chelsea are in such a good position this year to really challenge for the title, and those big players, they've got no risk of losing their spots in the first team at all.
I think a really good example of that, I agree with that point, someone like Cesc Fabregas, who had a shocking year last year, you could easily have expected him to maybe make a big money, big wage move somewhere.
PSG, that might have been somewhere like that.
Yeah, maybe even not necessarily a Champions League club, because I feel as though he almost didn't look bothered last year, and after the great first year he had. But with someone like Conte coming in, it's the kind of manager that just by that him arriving alone can convince a player like that to stay and to work hard for the team. And I totally agree with Jack on that point in terms of the personnel that they've kept, because they haven't made a huge amount of new signings. I know they've brought in
Batshuayi.
Belgian,
Batshuayi. I was going to say, Jack, do you think it'll be him over Costa?
Well, there's talk of Lukaku going, isn't there?
Well, this is the big thing.
I really want
4th of August, by the way. 4th of
controversial
August.
Here. I think I want Costa to go. I want Lukaku to come in, and I want a dual Belgium set up front in kind of an Italian-esque, And
you've got
one off
Hazard
the
behind
other
as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Think of the perfect chemistry in FIFA. That's what Conte sat there thinking.
Oh God.
And no, I feel like actually this year Chelsea will play two up top, and I wonder if Conte will try and implement kind of his 3-5-2 style. That
of course, Diego Costa was fantastic for Atletico Madrid in a front two as well. And I feel he thrived under Simeone, who has a kind of similar hands-on, prioritising commitment, a similar style to Conte. And if Costa does stay, he might be able to get the best out of him that we didn't see, particularly last year, and maybe not the year before either.
I think no European football for Chelsea will be huge this year. I think that will be a huge advantage.
And I think that's why they're probably my favourites for the title. So they're moving it into.
Oh, blimey! We'll start with that. Do you think they've got more? I mean, we'll come on to the other teams, of course, later in our previews. But you think they've got enough? Do you think they are the team to beat?
Well, my philosophy on this, I'm not. I think Guardiola at City. I mean, these are the names that obviously everyone will think of: is City, United, Chelsea. I mean, we've mentioned Arsenal. I think Guardiola has too big a rebuilding job at City. To immediately turn them into title challengers. I think if he does, hats off to him. But I think it maybe one more year it will take Guardiola to really sort of get them playing how he wants them to play and to mould the new signings. I think, as we've mentioned, Chelsea have kept a lot of their key players. They've obviously brought in a fantastic manager. They've made one or two signings which may just give them that extra bit of dynamism, and that may be enough to give them the title. I think Conte's massive experience of winning consecutive titles. He knows what it means to have that consistency across the season. And I think the Manchester clubs there'll be a bit of politics, there'll be a bit of sort of stuff going on off the field, and I feel that Chelsea have really sort of calmed it down this year, and have really sort of made the changes that need to be made.
The circus has moved away from Chelsea.
It definitely has, and it's moved to Manchester, and I think that may actually hamper those two clubs in the short term. Maybe long term we could see, particularly Guardiola at City challenging, winning. But this year, I think Chelsea.
I think very much top two is going to be the aim. Do I think they can win the league? Oh, it's such a competitive year. I think they might just get pipped to the post by City.
All right. So you're going second?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go second. But I'm really interested to see Chelsea because I feel like a lot of those players have got such a massive point to prove, especially off what was said last year.
And obviously no Champions League.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I mentioned that. No distraction. There is one focus for Chelsea this year, and it's a case of can the players who last year lacked that drive, lacked that focus under Mourinho, and beyond that their season was over, can they show that this year? And I hope to see they've got a professional group of players there, lots of big names. They've got to make it work, or it's an absolute disgrace.
I think just quickly, before Jack made a good point there. I think the no Champions League thing is a huge factor, and Conte. The question marks may come over Conte when they get into the Champions League because it was in that competition with Juventus that he struggled. But in terms of the domestic sort of strategy, I think he's very good on that. So that's why I'm backing them.
I think there needs to be a fire lit under all of these Chelsea players. Last year, however you want to look at it, whether you want to blame Mourinho or a player mutiny or whatever, was not good enough. There is so much talent within that Chelsea side that for some of the older players, I'm thinking of players like Mikel, even someone like Pedro, and there's a few other players, Diego Costa, another one, even maybe Fabregas as well in there, that if they don't perform this year and Chelsea don't get into the top four, that'll be 2 years in a row where a team that are suspected to do so much and expected to do so much will fall through again. And I think you're right, though. I think Conte being in there will drive a fire. I think there's a project now for Chelsea players to get behind. They know it's now about them, not about their manager, and I think that is kind of key for them. I don't think they'll win the league, but I do think they'll be second, third in there. I think they'll get top four, but I don't think they'll win the league. We'll talk about who I think will in a future podcast. And that does wrap up the first 4 teams of our Premier League preview show. I think the other preview shows may be a little bit shorter than this, but we've had quite a lot to talk about.
When we went into this, behind the scenes, removing the curtain, we said 25 minutes for these preview shows.
Yeah, you're lucky sausages.
Almost double that. So
yeah, you're lucky swines. Right, that does wrap us up then. Jack, Callum, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Right then, we'll see you again for our second preview show. The teams involved in that one will be Crystal Palace, Everton, Hull City, and the champions, Leicester City. That's what people would say. We'll see you again next time for the Fans Show. Goodbye.
It's a sculpture of a gold Benji. It's perfection.
Kino, I think you're going to have to be calling for an oxygen mask over here, my friend.